the Hall of Famer from Brazil. And on the other side of the table, Zimon, we had Christopher Larsen drafting, and we did, of course, record his draft to show now. We are going to have a look at exactly how things went for the Danish superstar as he gets underway with his draft in the top 8 here. He, of course, came first in the Swiss. You can see some of his opponents there. A quick glimpse of Yvonne Floch sitting across from him. He came in second, Zimon. But Christopher Larsen, very happy with himself with that result. I got the chance to catch up with him briefly before the draft, and he's feeling optimistic about his chances here.
And he will be on the play during this top 8 because of his first place after Swiss.
Well, we've seen in very aggressive formats that to make all the difference here, as you look straight at the rare, look at that. This guy doesn't muck around. Ether Win Basker, the first card that he's slotted away here, so we'll have a look if he's going to pick that one. Can see Vengeful Rebel also on the cards here. But Zimon, something to think about as we continue the draft. I want to hear about how influential it is to go first in the Ether Revolt format. In any case, in this pack, are you really interested in anything other than the Ether Wind Basket here?
I think Vengeful Rebel is a really strong card. I don't really like first picking a 7-drop in either Revolt.
Well, neither does Christopher Larsen, as we see Vengeful Rebel here, a very precise pick from him. This guy can just be an absolute house. I mean, he really, really can take it home for Team Rock and Roll there. Of course, killing off a creature at a moment's notice, as long as Revolt is enabled, and as long as you've got the tools of the trade here, the implements and whatever else, you can often get Revolt going.
I also like this pick because it will always be a good card, but if you start off early with such a pick, you can really build your deck around it.
So the next card, we were thinking about Daring Demolition perhaps, but it ended up being the old Vampire Nightwalk here, gifted Aetherborn. The 2/3 Death Touch lifelink joins the fray.
That shows you how Christopher Larsen evaluates removal as opposed to these hyper-efficient creatures.
Yeah, and I mean, this creature really towards the top end of what you can get away with here in Ether Revolt. Obviously, pretty strict color requirements. Talking to Frank Carsten about this earlier, and he was saying it does almost, mandate a 10-6 or a 10-7 mana base. You need 10 swamps to play this card.
That's the math. That's the math for when you want to cast it on turn 2.
Okay.
But I think it's powerful enough that you will still play it if in a deck with less swamps, it will just not be as effective.
Looked like an Ether Poisoner there was the pick for Christopher Larsen. He was spent some time idolizing that Spire of Industry there, but obviously not good enough to get over the top here as he chooses the 2-drop instead.
There was also a Cruel Finality.
Oh, right.
That was another time that he prefers a Death Touch creature over removal.
Well, we've seen the power of Death Touch creatures in this format thanks to the ubiquity of combat tricks. I mean, combat tricks have defined this format above removal, I would say, as a Weldfast Engineer is brought to the front of the pack here. Looks like Larsen's giving it some thought. So obviously he's more content to take a Death Touch creature, as we've said, rather than a combat trick. And here it is, the Weldfast Engineer, so a brief foray into red for Christopher Larsen.
I think that's exactly the right time to pick up a card like that. There were some mono-black options available to him, but you do want a second color anyway, and these marquee uncommons are a good reason to open yourself up.
Now, at the moment, no support for the Engineer in terms of other artifact creatures, but I'm sure that'll change as the packs continue. So Invigorated Rampage and a Cruel Finality brought to the front of the pack here for Christopher Larsen.
Also some support artifacts, but not the strongest ones.
No, so it is going to be the Finality here. That's a nice pickup in terms of, oh, hello, has a second think about it. No, adds it to the pack once, adds it to the picks once again. There is the Invigorated Rampage. We saw that card do a lot of damage at the end of day number 1 yesterday. And again, one of these combat tricks that has come to really keep people on their toes in the combat steps of Ether Revolt Limited.
Big fan of the card overall.
So here, Christopher Larsen having a think about a couple of interesting options here. Destructive Tampering and Siege Modification amongst them, but he's also brought Prizefighter Construct to the front of his hand here. This is not a card we've seen a lot of, but instead it's going to be the old Aeronaut Admiral here.
That was probably just a little bit too late for him to see this card. Also, black-white makes for really nice Revolt decks, which would fit in quite well with what he's currently trying to do.
Here's another Ether Poisoner, which I'm sure he's happy to pick up once again, and not a bad card when it comes to Revolt. Not only itself will often leave the battlefield, but also the servo that it creates. Also, generally doesn't stick around too long.
Absolutely.
So things coming together for Larson here. He's got a couple of different options that are off of black, but very firmly entrenched with the vast majority of his picks being quite strong black cards.
Yeah, and he has the black-red uncommon, he has a white uncommon, so both of these cards are potential options.
Foil Swamp brought to the front of Larson's hand as we see him ruminate on that one here.
I think
But it's going to be the Fencrawler.
Larson seems to appreciate foils.
Yeah, we saw him giving a little bit of a stroke with his finger. Did that with the Spire of Industry before. But right now it's this 5/5. You can get a fair bit of a discount if you're building your deck around it. Alley Strangler.
Which Larson is currently not doing, but this is very early in the draft, so let's see.
Well, he's a big boy, the Fen Hauler, and if you can get him down a bit earlier than usual, you're going to be in a good position. So Alley Strangler joining the picks for Christopher Larson. I like this card, a nice evasive threat.
And there was already the pack he started with, where the Etherwind Basker was of course picked, but the Druid of the Call, I believe, wheeled. Which
Did that go all the way around the table?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a big surprise there. As Larson continues to round out his picks, let's see what's here. We see the Spire of Industry. We're going to see, oh, look at that. He's going to take that one and pick it up very, very happily.
Tasty.
I mean, are you playing that as well? We're kind of we're being silly about the fact that it's a foil, but that's a fine card to include in your deck.
Yeah, of course, if you have an artifact something. Otherwise, you wouldn't want this kind of card in your deck.
So Larson continues to finish off this deck here. We saw an artifact go in there quick as lightning. Didn't get a good look at that and doesn't even look at the last card. What a gangster this guy is. So Christopher Larson, known for his burly, imposing figure and brash personality, certainly one of the characters on the European GP circuit, and always good to catch up with him at these GPs. A very confident gentleman, I think it's fair to say, and he'll have come to this draft with a good idea of what he wants to do. So we can see some of those artifacts that were picked up. They're little 1-cost 1/1s. And Hope of Girapur and the Automaton there, I mean, they're not the worst cards in the world.
I was just going to say that, especially if you end up being black-red, and you can pump the Hope of Girapur, +2/+0. It's not a card you ultimately want in your deck, but it's also not the worst.
No, and then there we see the old Augmenting Automaton doing its old Sludge Crawler impersonation. Interesting to see whether these cards make the cut, but he's got a solid base here. This isn't, this isn't him blowing out of the gates and sort of lifting everyone's skirts, but this is still doing a pretty good job.
He could even use the Spire to splash for one of these cards or something he picks up later.
Yeah, we haven't seen him commit too firmly to any other color. As you said, there is the gold card, the black and red uncommon, of course, the Weldfast Engineer, but on top of that, the Aeronaut Admiral. Neither of those cards, however, marrying him to those colors.
No, especially because he doesn't have the slam down synergy with either of them. No vehicles.
No, 0 vehicles. Yeah, that's a great point.
And the artifacts, I think...
Well, look, you're not putting Hope of Girapur in your deck because you have a Weldfast Engineer. Let's put it that way.
And also, with a few ways to make servos, that doesn't make it a strong card on its own.
No, I mean, if there's the support for it, the Weldfast Engineer can threaten to take over a battlefield at least temporarily. But Larson not in the best position to abuse the card as it stands. We'll move into pack number 2 now, as the Danish man gets stuck in to his second round of picks. Of course, the cards will be circulating anti-clockwise now.
And there we go.
Let's have a look at what we've got here. A Daring Demolition immediately brought to the front. Rishkar's expertise at the back, and a Fatal Push. So some top shelf removal options available for Larson here. What are you taking, Simon?
I think Fatal Push is better than the Demolition. Instant speed removal is just so powerful, and Larson would happily play one of these Demolitions, but he's not willing to spend a super high pick on them.
And the other thing is, he's odds on to see another Daring Demolition as the cards go around. And I mean, this one, it is efficient, it's clean, and it gets the job done. But Fatal Push scales very nicely into the late game.
And he's, of course, hoping that he put his left neighbor into green and out of black. So let's say, for example, green-red is a solid color combination, which means that Larson is hoping that especially black commons, the good black commons will be coming around.
Ironclad Revolutionary, and here's the Daring Demolition. So just like the Doctor ordered, here's Simon.
And that's the point where you want to pick it up, and that's probably the one that you want.
So a nice pickup here as Larson continues to develop his deck. And he'll be very happy with this. I think that's just exactly what you were saying, Zimon. He wanted to pick up the top-notch commons, the top-notch uncommons, and the thing about the two cards that he's just picked, the Fatal Push and the Daring Demolition, both play similar roles, but in a different way. We've got instant speed removal. We've got a card that scales nicely, requires a little bit more work at the cost of 1 mana. But Daring Demolition, you just pointed at something and the thing goes away.
They are almost at the other side, at the opposing sides of the spectrum, except that Fatal Push, of course, with a tremendous revolt trigger.
So once again, Larson evaluating his options here as we see we've got a scrapper there, we've got a few implements as well, and he's whizzing through these cards nice and quick, isn't he?
Yeah, and this is a bit weaker. I like Sky Requisitioner. I don't think the deck is currently set up to maximize it, but neither of these cards are. Defiant Salvager similarly doesn't have the same kind of support.
So there you see Sly Requisitioner on your screen, but the pick ends up being the Defiant Salvager, the grey ogre that can gain +1/+1 counters if you sacrifice artifacts or creatures. Excuse me. As we head through the next pick here, and only one black card to speak of here as we see the Night Market Aeronaut, but it looks like Deadeye Harpooner might be getting the nod from Larson here.
I would absolutely agree with picking the Harpooner here. I think it's a very valuable card for Larson. Larson is very happy playing white in his heavy black deck. He has now 2 very solid uncommons, and he hasn't really seen signs that red is open.
No, there hasn't been a lot of that going around, so it might be time to say goodnight to the Weldfast Engineer here. As Larson examines this next pack, and it's Girapur Osprey, and I like what Larson's doing here, committing to a second colour, going in for this, and you know, not sort of fiddly-farting around with where he wants to be. He wants to be in 2 colours and pick up those key commons as early as possible.
And really have the right curve, because that's ultimately going to decide a lot of these games. He also knows he is on the play, so putting on pressure is an even higher priority.
Well, let's see what this next pack can uncover here, and that's a nice one. Countless Gears Renegade. I'm a big fan of this card as we move through the rest of them. A few artifacts at the back, but it looks like it is going to be the Renegade. Larson really hasn't even considered many of these artifacts that have been available to him.
No, but you can tell that he's quite experienced already with this format. I'm sure this isn't the 3rd draft he's done.
No, brash and stride and confidence as he makes his way through these packs. He knows what he's looking for here, but I like the way he's settled into these 2 colours. I'm impressed by his draft style overall, I think.
I don't remember a single pick that I actively disagreed with, and that's rare.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a reason to disagree with someone, Zimon, generally you'll take it. Here's an alley evasion. The aerial modification, the other option there, but you happy with the evasion as well?
I like the card a lot. I think having one in your 23 playables, 24 playables, makes your deck just a lot better.
Just the utility, just the flexibility, the utility. Neither of these options kind of step on the other. They're so far apart from each other, but in terms of revolt, just winning combat, getting through, the cards continue to impress me. It costs 1 mana, man. It's 1 mana. Aether Inspector, the one of the options here for Larson.
A bit of a weaker card.
Ooh, Renegade Rallier out of nowhere. That's going to be plucked out of that pack by Larson here.
Who knows? If he picks up a Prophetic Prism, for example, he has 2 ways to generate green mana.
Really not a fan of that Aether Inspector by the look of things.
No, the Aether Inspector is so mediocre.
It's going to take it here all the same. I don't imagine that's going to be making its way into his 24, 23 starters, if he can help it. I think out of all that Aether X cycle, the Inspector has generally been the weakest. But here's an interesting choice. We're going to take an implement of improvement rather than the Girapur Osprey.
He already has an Osprey, and he wants to make sure that he can trigger a Revolt when he needs it.
Yeah, that's going to be key with some of the cards that he's picked up, of course. Let's not forget that the Harpooner was picked pretty early on before, cementing him into white. And Reservoir Walker comes down as a 5-drop. I'm not sure if Larson is looking to play cards like this, but I don't know. It's a solid beater here.
That's a great pickup, by the way. This late white implement, second white implement, I'm quite sure that Larson is happily going to play both. Might even drop his land count to 16 because of it. And
we see this so often now. Zimon, one of the ongoing sort of threads of narrative that we've discussed this weekend has just been how important these implements are. They're so much better than people gave them credit for.
Yeah.
People, the pros at the top level of the game are really picking them much higher than we first anticipated. I think all of us, when we first looked at the previews of these cards, were like, oh yeah, okay, well, I can see that obviously these are planted here to get some stuff done. But Honestly, it's blown me away how keen a lot of very, very good players are on a card like Implement of Improvement.
And how important they are for the mechanics of the set.
Yeah.
Improvise maybe not as much, but especially Revolt.
That's interesting that you mentioned that as well, because it's certainly been on my mind the fact that we haven't really seen Improvise shine. Not in the same way that Revolt has. Revolt has really turned the format on its head in terms of having to play around, removal spells or getting into combat in tricky situations, whatever else. Improvise, it's been here and there, but it hasn't had the impact that Revolt has.
And I think that makes a lot of sense because the Revolt decks are inherently better, inherently more consistent. You just get good creatures that overperform from time to time.
Mhm.
And if you try to maximize on Improvise, you need to have half of your deck be artifacts, half of your decks be the creatures that get cheaper, and it's much more difficult to really fit that puzzle together.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about Revolt cards that it's important to remember is the fact that, if you cast a Countless Gears Renegade without Revolt, it's still a 2-mana 2/2. It's still going to get in there. It can attack, it can block, it can do stuff. And the same is true of cards like, say, the Deadeye Harpooner. Even though that's not quite as good, it's still a fine card. Like, it's fine, right?
And if your deck, and Christopher Larson's deck has this property, has Vengeful Rebel, Fatal Push, and the Deadeye Harpooner, you can just consider these implements as a delayed card draw. You basically gave up your draw step, but you are guaranteed to get this one-shot effect when you need it.
So we're back to our Kaladesh pack now, and we can see Larson has another foil. We'll see if he's going to give it a bit of a stroke in just a second. Aerial Maneuver at the front of his pack right now, but a Ballista Charger also under consideration here, Simon.
Acrobatic Maneuver is so good with Revolt.
Well, the thing about it is, of course, it just immediately triggers Revolt. Like, there's no if, buts, or maybes. You target a Revolt creature, it sees itself as having left the battlefield, and you get the effect sometimes a second time, and you draw a card.
I agree with Larson, however, to pick the vehicle.
Okay.
Its Acrobatic Maneuver is basically good for 1, maybe 2 drafters at the table. And it's a common. And you don't really want 2 or 3 of them. So
Fairgrounds Warden brought to the front of this pack. Sorry, go on.
I think a good decision to let this one move to the left.
And Larson will be happy to pick up that Fairgrounds Warden as well. I think he's made a very good decision moving into white as he has, because he's picked up some pretty valuable cards here, the Warden being amongst them, doing the old Banisher Priest or the Fiend Hunter impression here, but a lot easier to cast than Old Mate Fiend Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
As a 1/3 as well, it stands up pretty well to a lot of the threats in this format. Holds off servo tokens without any worries.
And also some of the cheap servo token generators.
Yeah, that's true. We've seen things like, you look at the red, the Ether Chaser.
2/1 first strike.
Yeah, holds it off nicely.
Was also a very good role player yesterday in the Sealed Potion.
Let's have a look at what this next pack is going to offer here. And we can see, again, some removal options here. Essence Extraction is an uncommon. 3 mana, gain 3 life and do 3 damage. Let's not forget that. Deal 3 damage. That part also somewhat relevant.
Yeah, and we already mentioned that Christopher Larson will want to be playing up to 10 black sources.
Yeah, of course.
So the casting cost, even early in the game, shouldn't be a big issue. No,
one of the more restrictive elements of this card, of course, its casting cost, but shouldn't be a problem here for the Dane. He'll be happy to have picked up another piece of removal. Fragmentize at the top of this card, at the top of this pack here, and he's found. Ooh, it's a Sky Whaler's Shot.
Also a module there hiding in the back, but not a consideration for Larson.
Going to be the Sky Whaler Shot after all. This is a card. I remember when we were drafting triple Kaladesh, and always a card that had to be on your radar. Always a card you had to consider and think about its impact and playing around, all that sort of stuff. We don't see a lot of them these days.
No, because there are just less packs of Kaladesh, of course. But this is an amazing card. You get to kill almost all the creatures you care about.
And you almost always trade up on mana as well. You're almost always killing a 5-drop, a 4-drop, whatever.
Or you punish combat tricks.
Oh, that's the other thing. You get those tasty 2-for-1s. Here's Revoke Privileges. That's another nice one. Just a piece of unconditional removal for Christopher Larson. I really like the way his deck's shaping up. Again, it's not this sort of gut-busting monstrosity, but all the same, it's got a lot of quality. The card quality goes pretty deep here.
From the first pick, from just shipping the green mythic rare to positioning himself to be open towards black-red or black-white, I have to give Christopher Larsen a lot of credit for this draft.
Built to last and Propeller Pioneer, the options for Larsen here, and it's going to be Propeller Pioneer.
He can use a few more creatures. He has so much removal now that he doesn't really want or can't really afford a lot more non-creature spells.
So taking to the skies here with the Propeller Pioneer, and also generates an artifact. I mean, maybe we can get Revolt going if we're getting that servo out of the way. That's not a bad way to start here.
He also has that alley evasion to sometimes recover one of these cards, which, by the way, has also incredible synergy with Revolt.
Yeah, that's also true. So as we pointed out before, a Cogworker's Puzzle Knot hanging out the back of Christopher Larsen's hand here, but an ambitious Aetherborn looks to be the pick. Whoop, having a second think about it. Nope, just showing the camera there.
His artifact synergies are not as strong, such that he would want to play the Puzzle Knot.
Bricata Club Security here, another pickup that I think you almost always happy with. I mean, it's not a great card, but still a 4-mana 4/3. You can't go too wrong with that. If
you don't have too many 4-drops, and I think Larsen doesn't or didn't have a lot of them at the moment, then you're happy to play this 4-mana 3/4. It's not Pima Outrider, but it's also not much worse.
But it lines up so well against so many of the other cards. It can just brick wall your opponent. There are so many 3/2s, so many 2/3s in the format, and you play this on turn 4, you slap this bad boy down, and no one's getting past.
And it's also quite good at double blocking some of the bigger monsters.
Ninth Bridge Patrol, as well as a Metalwork Colossus here. How deep is Christopher Larsen going to go? Looks like a Harsh Scrutiny hiding up there as well. We've seen the Metalwork Colossus. I don't know if that's going to find its way into Larsen's deck.
I would be quite surprised.
So another Pracatus Club Security, and it's going to be the self-assembler. I don't think we saw any other assembly workers from the Aether Revolt packs.
I didn't quite check for it, but it makes sense to just take it out. You don't want somebody's deck to suddenly get that much better because they get some chain going.
Terror of the Fairgrounds, the final pick as the Larger for Life gets passed around, and Larsen with his final card here. Let's get a look at it. It was a blue card. It didn't get a great view of what it was there, but Simon, your final thoughts here on Christopher Larsen's deck? It's come together. It's come together pretty well.
I think this was tremendously well drafted. I think the difficult decisions were not really in pick 1. I think that was actually a pretty clear choice. Staying in black after the signals you got was also quite easy. However, prioritizing the creatures over the removal first and then still ending up with a lot of it shows that he prioritized cards in the right way.
Yeah.
And he found his second color with an ease that not many people can.
No, I think a lot of people look for that second color quite early, quite aggressively. They're wanting to cement themselves into their color combination. But Larsen just let the cards speak to him. He let them come to him, and I think that's really impressive.
Yeah. Calm like water.
That's it. Calm like water. Still like the silent wind. Ladies and gentlemen, that is that for the drafting period, of course. We've shown you drafts from Paulo Vitor, Dammit Rosa, and Christopher Larsen, and now it's time to get into the action, my friends. Stick around because the quarterfinals of GP Prague will be coming your way